Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back in AI era Islamic Abrahamic wisdom. History warns us again and again, power becomes dangerous the moment it stops listening. Unchecked authority blinds even the most sincere rulers. And consultation, shura, is not weakness. It is the discipline that protects power from arrogance. In today's episode, inspired by the research and writings of Mr. Zahir Ahmad Mir, we explore how Hazrat Umar ibn al-Khattab, radiyallahu an, transformed consultation from a moral suggestion into a constitutional institution. This is the story of Majlis al-Shūrā, where leadership was strengthened by collective wisdom, where disagreement was loyalty, and where governance became the conscience of a community. This is not democracy. This is not autocracy. This is consultative constitutionalism.
Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to our channel, AI Era Islamic Abrahamic Wisdom.
It's a real pleasure to be here.
Today we're going to be doing something really special. We're cracking open Mr. Zahir Ahmad Mir's book, The Foundation of Islamic Jurisprudence.
A phenomenal work.
It really is. And specifically, we're diving into Volume 1, Sub-Volume 3. We're really focusing, on the governance and constitutional decisions of Hazrat Umar bin al-Khattab. May God be pleased with him.
It's such a profound part of history. You could argue this is one of the most significant sections of the entire work, really.
Why do you say that?
Because it's where all that high-level theory, meets the hard, gritty reality of actually running a state.
Exactly. It really is. And before we get into the deep end here, I do have a quick favor to ask of you listening right now. Please subscribe to our channel and please. And also share this video with your friends. It just, it helps us get this knowledge out to more people.
It absolutely does.
So let's unpack this. I want to start by framing the problem. Because the source material, it doesn't just jump into, dry laws. It starts with a very human dilemma.
Right.
It's a concept that feels as old as time itself, but it's something we still struggle with today in every corporation, every government, maybe even every family. And that's the problem of power.
Power. It is the central tension of history. It's the variable that just changes everything.
It does. And the big question we're wrestling with in this deep dive is this. What happens when a ruler stops listening? We tend to have this sort of romanticized idea of the leader. The solitary figure on a mountaintop, making all the hard calls, bearing the burden alone.
You see it in movies, you read it in novels. The lonely genius.
The lonely genius, exactly. But the source material we're looking at today argues something pretty radical. It says that model is actually a recipe for disaster. It argues that unchecked authority, no matter how sincere the ruler is, eventually makes them blind.
And that is the core danger that the text identifies. Mr. Mir's analysis puts it so starkly. Unchecked authority makes even sincere rulers blind.
I'm glad you emphasized that word, sincere.
We have to. We aren't just talking about corrupt tyrants here. We're talking about good people. People who genuinely want to do the right thing, who, because they're isolated, lose their sight.
So your intentions don't matter at that point?
Not if you're in an echo chamber. If you're isolated, you cannot see the cliff edge that you're walking towards.
That's a scary thought. You can have the best heart in the world, but if you shut the door to outside voices, you're doomed. So the mission for us today in this deep dive is to explore what the book classifies as Case 19. This covers the years 14 to 23 after Hijrah.
Right.
And we're looking at how a 7th century leader, Hazrat Umar, didn't just ask for advice to be polite. He institutionalized listening. He made it a constitutional necessity.
Precisely. And we have to draw a very sharp line here right at the start so you, the listener, understand the gravity of this. We aren't talking about a leader just asking a buddy, hey, what do you think? Over dinner. We're talking about the Majlis al-Shūrā. This was the constitutional discipline of power.
A system, not a mood.
Exactly. It wasn't something he did when he felt like it. It was how the state functioned day in and day out.
Okay, so let's set the scene, because I think it's easy to forget the scale of what was happening during this period. We hear 7th century, and we might think small, simple, maybe a village.
Yeah, that's not the reality here. Not at all.
So what was the reality?
The context is absolutely vital to understanding why this system was so necessary. We're in a period of rapid, I mean, almost explosive expansion for the Islamic State.
Right. This isn't just a small community in Medina anymore.
Not even close.
Right.
It's not a place where everyone knows everyone's name and you can just shout out a question in the marketplace. The borders were pushing out aggressively.
And they were engaging with the superpowers of the day.
Significantly, the Persian Empire, the Byzantine Empire. They were absorbing vast territories that stretched across different climates, different cultures, different histories.
So suddenly you're dealing with complex administration, new languages, new economies.
Yeah.
You're not just managing Medina, you're managing Damascus, Jerusalem, Ctesiphon.
Exactly that.
Yeah.
You have these diverse populations who have completely different expectations of what governance even is. You've got complex military strategy on multiple fronts at the same time.
Fighting two superpowers at once.
At once. And then there are the fiscal policy questions, massive questions. How do you tax a harvest in the Fertile Crescent versus a trade route in the desert? Do you need a navy? The sheer volume of decisions that had to be made was just, it was exploding.
And this is what brings us to what the source calls the constitutional problem. If you try to run that kind of complexity with a single mind, you hit very specific risks. The source actually breaks this down into 4 of them. And what's fascinating to me is that these apply just as much to a modern CEO of a huge company as they did to a caliph in the 7th century.
They're universal. They are structural flaws of centralized power. It's just human nature.
Okay, so let's run through them. I think everyone listening will recognize these traps. The first one is blind spots.
Right. This is almost like a physics problem.
How so?
No single mind can see everything. It's physically and intellectually impossible.
Right.
If you're looking north, you can't see what's happening in the south.
Okay.
If you're totally focused on the treasury and the spreadsheets, you might completely miss the social unrest that's brewing in the marketplace. The single mind always has a limited field of vision.
It's the classic unknown unknowns. You don't know what you don't know.
And you can't, because you're not even looking at it. And if you don't have anyone standing on the other side of the room telling you what's there, you start operating in a delusion.
And in a state that's growing that fast, those blind spots can be fatal.
Absolutely fatal. If you miss a famine starting in a remote province because you're too focused on the capital, by the time you realize it, it's already too late. The system has crashed.
That makes perfect sense. Okay, so the second risk is overconfidence. This feels a bit more psychological.
It's a psychological trap, 100%. When a leader consistently acts alone, certainty begins to replace deliberation. When there's no one in the room to say, wait a minute, have you thought about this? Or that data seems off. The leader starts to believe their first instinct is always the correct one.
It's an echo chamber of one person. You start to believe your own hype.
That's exactly. And the source argues this leads directly to hubris. You start to think your intuition is infallible. And history is just littered with leaders who marched their people right off a cliff because they were absolutely certain they were right.
Simply because nobody checked them.
Simply because no one was allowed to.
Okay, risk number 3 in the source is legitimacy erosion. This sounds a bit more political.
It is. This is all about how the people feel about the decisions being made. If every decision is always handed down from on high, like a thunderbolt from Zeus, with no input.
Right, with no explanation.
Then those decisions feel imposed. They feel like orders, not agreements.
And people don't feel like they own them.
Correct. And if people don't feel a sense of ownership over a law or a policy, they'll only follow it because they fear punishment, not because they believe in the path.
And that's a very brittle kind of stability.
Very. As soon as the threat is gone, the compliance just evaporates. You want buy-in. You want people to follow because they understand the why and they feel represented in the decision.
Or at least they know someone they trust was in the room when it was made.
That's a huge part of it. Knowing a scholar you respect or someone from your tribe was there.
That brings us to the 4th risk, succession fragility.
This is the great man trap. It's the bane of so many empires throughout history.
Tell me more about that. What does that mean?
Well, if your entire system of governance relies on one genius, one singular charismatic figure who holds it all together in his head, what happens when he's gone?
The whole thing collapses.
Instantly. You haven't built a state. You've just built a personality cult. If the entire mechanism of decision-making lives and dies with one person, the state is incredibly fragile.
And the source points out that Umar was aware of this.
Acutely aware. He didn't want to build a system that only worked when he was there. He wanted to build a structure that could survive him, that could outlast him.
So he looks at this map. He sees the blind spots, the risk of arrogance, the need for buy-in, the need for longevity. And he realizes he just can't do this alone.
He chooses institutional wisdom over personal brilliance. And that right there is the key shift.
And the solution he implements is the Majlis al-Shūrā, the Consultative Council.
That's the one.
There's a quote from the source here that I love. I think it summarizes the philosophy just perfectly. It says, "Consultation does not dilute authority. It refines it."
That is the headline. It refines it. And I think we need to pause on that for a second because it's so counterintuitive to how many people think about power.
It really is. A lot of leaders are afraid that if they ask for help or if they open the floor to debate, they'll look weak.
Right. The thinking is, I'm the boss, I'm supposed to know the answer. If I ask you, I look incompetent.
Yeah.
But Umar established the exact opposite principle. Asking for counsel makes the final authority stronger because the decision has been stress-tested.
Ah, I like that term, stress-tested.
It filters out the bad ideas, the blind spots, the emotional biases before they become law. So when the order is finally given, it's solid. It's been refined in the fire of debate.
So let's get into the nuts and bolts. We've established the why, the dangers of the single mind. Now let's look at the what. What did this Majlis al-Shūrā actually look like?
It's so important to visualize this correctly. The source really emphasizes that this wasn't some random gathering. It wasn't informal.
Okay.
It describes it as a standing consultative body.
Standing. That implies permanence, right? Structure.
Yes. It meant it was institutionalized.
Maybe.
It wasn't just, hey, whoever's hanging around the mosque today, come on in. It had membership. It had protocols. It existed as an entity, separate from the momentary whim of the ruler.
So who was in it? Who got a seat at the table?
It was composed of the senior companions of the Prophet. And the text notes that it was summoned regularly for general governance and also specifically for urgent needs. It was a functional body, not a symbolic one.
They weren't just there to drink tea.
No, they met to solve problems, real pressing problems.
This leads to the critical question of selection. In modern democracy, we're so used to elections. Who gets the most votes? Who has the best slogans? Was it anything like that?
Not at all. And this is a crucial distinction that the source makes very, very clear. It was not based on elective populism. It wasn't about who was most popular with the masses.
So what was it based on?
It was based on something the book calls competence-based inclusion.
Competence-based inclusion. That's a dense phrase.
Yeah.
Let's break that down for everyone. What does that actually mean?
It means you were at that table because you brought specific, demonstrable value, not because you were famous or wealthy or popular.
And there were criteria.
Oh, rigorous criteria. First and
Right.
foremost, you had to have deep knowledge of the Quran and the Sunnah.
Which makes sense. That's the constitution of the state. You have to know the law.
Exactly. You had to understand the moral and the legal framework. You couldn't just suggest a law that violated the core tenets of the faith. But, and this is so key, it wasn't just about theoretical theology.
You couldn't just be a bookworm.
No. You needed practical judgment, what they called hikmah, or wisdom.
Street smarts, almost.
In a way, yes. You also needed integrity.
Mhm.
People had to trust your character, not just your brain. And finally, you needed real-world experience in governance or in warfare.
So you needed people who had actual skin in the game. Real skills. Bridge builders, generals, jurists.
Precisely. The source argues this was the mechanism to avoid mob rule. You didn't want the person who could shout the loudest or whip up a crowd.
You wanted the person who could think the deepest.
Exactly. It was designed to ensure high-quality deliberation.
It's so interesting because today we often conflate democracy with good governance. We just assume that if everyone votes, the result is automatically good. But this model suggests that good governance comes from expertise and morality, not necessarily just a head count.
That is the core of the argument. It's about the quality of the input. The analogy is, if you put 10 people in a room who know nothing about engineering, and you have them vote on how to build a bridge,
The bridge is going to fall down.
the bridge is going to fall down.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if the vote was unanimous. Gravity doesn't care about your vote. Umar wanted the bridge builders in the room. He wanted the people who actually understood the mechanics of society.
So they have this room full of experts, wise men, people with integrity. What did they actually talk about?
I think there's a common misconception that early Islamic governance was just about, prayer times or religious rituals.
No, and this is where the deep dive into the source material gets really fascinating. The scope was incredibly practical and frankly modern.
Okay.
The source lists the actual agenda items, and they read like the cabinet meeting of a modern superpower.
Give us the list. What was on the table?
Okay, first, military campaigns. When to attack, when to withdraw, where to deploy resources. These are life and death decisions involving thousands of troops and shifting geopolitical borders.
So high-stakes stuff right off the bat.
The highest. Then, taxation and fiscal reforms. How do we collect revenue? How do we distribute the zakat? How do we manage the spoils of war? This is straight-up economic policy.
Money, the lifeblood of the state.
Absolutely. Next up, provincial appointments, the hiring and firing of governors.
So HR and administration. Big time. If a governor in Egypt is misbehaving, who decides to remove him? As discussed in the Shura. Then, judicial policy. How do we interpret the law in these new situations we're encountering?
See, finally.
Emergency responses and public welfare? Famines, plagues, infrastructure?
So basically, everything. Nothing was off limits.
Nothing of state significance was considered too small or too personal for the ruler to consult on. If it affected the Ummah, the community, it went to the Shura.
This sounds incredibly efficient in theory. You get the best minds, you talk about the big issues. But I can also see a potential downside. We've all been in those meetings that never, ever end. Death by committee. You just debate and nothing ever happens. Did this system lead to paralysis?
That is the great fear of any consultative body gridlock. But the source outlines what we might call the algorithm of governance under Umar that was designed to solve this very problem.
An algorithm. I like that. So it was a process.
A very specific rhythm. It was designed to prevent exactly that kind of paralysis.
Okay, walk us through the steps of the algorithm.
Step 1. Consult widely. This is the listening phase. You open the floor. You gather all the perspectives. You let the experts speak. You actively seek out the dissenting voices, get all the data on the table.
So this is the divergence phase, where you look at all the options.
Exactly. But then comes step 2, decide firmly. And this is the key. The Shura advises, but the leader decides. It's not necessarily a majority vote where 51% wins.
So the buck still stops with the caliph.
It has to. Otherwise, you get stuck in endless loops or these watered-down compromises that please no one. The leader's job is to listen to all the arguments, weigh the wisdom, and then he makes the call. He synthesizes the advice into a decision.
Okay, and step 3.
Step 3, execute consistently. Once the decision is made, the debate stops, and unity follows. Because the people know their concerns were heard in step 1, they're willing to support the execution in step 3.
Even if it wasn't their preferred option.
Even if they argued against it, they trust the process.
That is such a delicate balance. It prevents the gridlock you see in modern parliaments where nothing gets done, but it preserves the value of getting all that diverse input.
It's a constitutional rhythm. Consult, decide, execute. It keeps the state moving forward without becoming reckless.
I want to pivot now to what I think is the most surprising and maybe the most challenging part of this whole system for us to understand today.
I think I know where you're going.
The culture of dissent.
Yes. This is where the personality of Umar himself really shaped the institution in a profound way.
Because, I mean, typically, throughout history, you do not say no to a king. You don't correct an emperor. That is a very good way to lose your head.
Exactly. In most courts at that time, and honestly, even in many corporate boardrooms today, the goal is to please the leader. The courtier's job is to flatter and agree.
But Umar, he normalized dissent.
He didn't just tolerate it, he welcomed it. He demanded it.
There's a phrase in the source material about this that really, it just struck me. It redefines a word we use all the time. The phrase is, loyalty meant honesty, not silence.
That is the aha moment of this entire section, isn't it?
It is.
Because in so many systems, loyalty means agreeing with the boss. Yes, sir. You are right, sir. Brilliant idea, sir.
The yes man.
Exactly. But in the Shura system that Umar built, if you saw the caliph making a mistake and you stayed silent, you were being disloyal.
Wow.
You were betraying your duty to the community and ultimately to God. Silence was seen as a form of negligence. If you see the ship is heading for an iceberg and you don't say anything because you don't want to upset the captain,
No, you are responsible for the crash.
you're responsible.
Yeah.
That is a massive psychological shift. It means that correcting the leader is an act of love for the state, not an act of rebellion.
It really is. And there are stories about this, right?
Oh, yes. We have records of Umar famously reversing his own decisions in public when he was convinced by a better argument. He wasn't attached to being right. He was attached to doing what was right.
So his ego wasn't in the way.
Not at all. The source highlights that he would often say things like, Umar is wrong and so is right. Can you imagine a modern politician saying that on live television? I was wrong. My opponent was right.
It's almost unimaginable, but for him, the objective wasn't personal glory, it was the success of the Ummah. So if a member of the Shura said, Umar, this strategy is flawed because of X, Y, and Z, he wouldn't take it personally, he'd thank them.
Because they just saved the state from making a huge error.
Now, we've been talking about this elite council, the Majlis al-Shūrā, these are the top experts. But was consultation limited to just these senior figures? Was this an ivory tower where only the elites got to speak?
No, and this is the other crucial layer that Mr. Mir's book brings out so well, the concept of the public shura.
The public shura, tell us about that.
It wasn't just this elite council. Umar regularly utilized open forums.
Like what?
Mosque gatherings, for instance, or the big Hajj assemblies when people from all over the world were gathered. These were opportunities where ordinary citizens could speak directly to the leadership.
So a regular person, a farmer or a merchant, could actually stand up and question policy.
Yes, and they did. The source alludes to several famous incidents where ordinary people, and this includes both men and women, would stand up in the mosque and correct the caliph on points of law or policy.
I remember reading about one regarding dowries.
That's a classic example. And how did he react? Did he have them arrested for impertinence?
No.
No. He accepted it. If the argument was sound, based on the Quran or the Sunnah, he would yield, often publicly. This bridged that huge gap between the ruler and the ruled.
It seems like it would build an incredible amount of trust.
It does. It tells the common person, you are part of this project too. Your voice matters. It creates a cohesive society, not a stratified one. It makes the state resilient. It's like a pressure release valve.
It really is. Okay, let's zoom out a little bit. We love to categorize things in the modern world. We have these buckets: democracy, monarchy, autocracy. How does the source classify this system? Is it democracy?
The source is very clear on this. It is neither. And trying to force it into one of those modern boxes really misses the point.
It's neither. Okay, so explain why not.
Well, it's not majority populism, which is the flaw that's often associated with pure democracy.
Right, the mob rule danger we talked about earlier.
Exactly. In a pure democracy, 51% of the people can vote to oppress the other 49%. Or a charismatic but totally incompetent leader can get elected just because they give great speeches. The Shura system has guardrails against that.
What are the guardrails?
The moral law, the Quran and Sunnah, and the competence requirement for the advisors. You can't, for example, just vote to make alcohol legal because the moral law forbids it. The majority doesn't get to rule over morality.
Okay, and it's obviously not autocracy.
It is certainly not authoritarian decree, where one person rules by fiat and their word is law, regardless of logic or justice.
So if it's neither of those, what is the term the source uses?
The term used is consultative constitutionalism.
Consultative constitutionalism. Let's unpack that for everyone listening.
Okay. It means the government is constitutional. It's bound by a higher law, in this case, divine law.
Right.
The ruler is not above the law.
Right.
And it is consultative. The ruler must consult the experts. So you could say it's expertise-driven, morally anchored, and leader accountable.
It really sounds like a unique third way of governance.
It is. It's an attempt to balance the efficiency of strong leadership with the wisdom of the collective, all under the umbrella of immutable ethical constraints.
When we look at the modern world, though, we see things that look like this on the surface, don't we? We have cabinets, we have parliaments, advisory boards. So are we doing this today?
I would say we have the form, but the source argues we often lack the substance.
What do you mean by that, form versus substance?
Modern systems fail when consultation becomes theater. You know, you hold the meeting, you nod your head, you have the focus groups, but you've already made up your mind before you even walked into the room. That's staged consultation.
Ah, the classic listening tour that doesn't actually change the policy. It's just about checking a box.
Exactly. It's a PR stunt, not a governance tool. Or even worse is when dissent is actively punished.
Right.
If a cabinet member disagrees with the president or prime minister and suddenly they're getting negative leaks in the press or they're fired the next day, that sends a crystal clear signal to everyone else.
Do not speak the truth. Keep your mouth shut.
It kills the feedback loop. Everyone goes right back to being a yes man to protect their career.
So what made Umar's consultation different?
It was genuine. It wasn't managed consent. He was genuinely afraid of making a mistake. Remember, in his worldview, he was accountable to God for every single decision.
So he needed the input.
He needed it to ensure he was getting it right. It was a spiritual necessity for him, not just a political one. That humility, that fear of making a mistake, that seems to be the engine that makes the whole thing work.
Without that humility, the mechanism just fails.
It does. If the leader thinks they're a genius who already knows everything, the Shūrā just becomes a rubber stamp.
This has been such a fascinating look at the structure of power. I want to bring it home for our listeners now. We've covered a lot of ground.
We have.
If we had to summarize the Umar model of governance based on Mr. Mir's book, what are the key lessons? I think the source mentions 5.
That's right. 5 key takeaways you can apply to your business, your community, or just how you understand politics.
Okay, lesson 1.
Build real consultative institutions. Don't just rely on informal chats with your favorites. Build a structure that forces you to listen to diverse views. Make it a standing body. Make listening a habit, not just a one-time event.
Lesson 2.
Choose merit over popularity. When you're picking your advisors, don't pick the people who just make you feel good or the people who are popular with the crowd. Pick the people who have the competence and the character.
Look for the bridge builders, not the cheerleaders.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay, lesson 3. This is the scary one for a lot of leaders.
Protect the right to dissent. You have to create a safe harbor for bad news. If you shoot the messenger, you will eventually be blind. Make it absolutely clear that loyalty equals honesty. Reward the person who points out your errors.
Lesson 4 is about that algorithm we discussed.
Yes. Decide decisively after listening. Don't get stuck in analysis paralysis. Do the listening, weigh the evidence, and then lead. The consultation is the fuel, but the decision is the engine. You have to turn it on.
And the final one, lesson 5.
Let consultation bind society to the outcome. Use the process of consultation itself to get buy-in. If people see the process was fair and their voices were heard, they will support the outcome, even if they disagree with it. It creates unity in action.
It's just such a powerful blueprint, not just for a state, but for any organization, really.
It really is. It turns leadership from this lonely, isolating burden into a collective strength.
As we wrap up, I want to leave everyone with a final thought. We started with this idea that power is dangerous, that it can blind people.
I think the final philosophical takeaway from this whole deep dive is this. Power that listens endures. Power that isolates collapses.
That's it in a nutshell.
Umar ensured that governance was not the voice of one man. Through this system, it became the conscience of a community.
The conscience of a community. That's a beautiful way to put it.
By disciplining his own power through consultation, he built something that could outlast him. He built a civilization that could think for itself. And that's the fundamental difference between a tyrant and a true caliph.
Well, this has been an incredible exploration of Case 19. But the story of governance, it doesn't stop here, does it?
No, not at all. It gets even more complex.
In our next deep dive, we're going to be looking at Case 20. And we're talking about provincial emergency powers.
Ooh, this is a huge topic. It's about balancing central authority with local autonomy in a crisis.
So when a plague hits or a famine strikes, who calls the shots? The capital or the local governor on the ground?
Sounds like a modern federalism debate, doesn't it?
It really does. I can't wait to dig into that one.
It has striking parallels to today. You won't want to miss it.
Thank you so much for breaking all this down with us.
It was my pleasure.
And thank you to everyone listening. We hope this gave you a new perspective on how history has tackled these eternal problems of power and leadership. We will see you in the next deep dive.